Mission 5, start!
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and a continuing series, Metal Slug Madness, where I review and take a look at every single mainline Metal Slug game and talk about the evolution of the series. And this is a game ender for us today because we're taking a look at Metal Slug 7 on the Nintendo DS. It is the last mainline Metal Slug game we have gotten, and it is the first and only game that did not get an arcade release as well, because 1 through 6 and X were also released in arcades, and this is the first time that a Metal Slug game bypassed the arcades completely and just went to a portable console. Now this game is available on the Nintendo DS, and it's also available on Steam, the Xbox 360, as well as the PlayStation Portable. I went with the DS version just because it's the original iteration, and those other versions just have slightly different paths and extra characters. If you're going to play one, maybe that would be the one you wanted to play, but I own it on the DS, so I figured let's talk about that version. So Metal Slug 7 is a decent game. It is a lot of fun, and it's got all the action you're expecting from the franchise, but unfortunately, Noise Factory did the same thing that they did in Metal Slug 4, which has just made the game a little drab feeling. A lot of the fine detail obviously isn't here because we're dealing with something like the Nintendo DS versus the Neo Geo AES or the Atomus Wave, and while the backgrounds do look interesting and they do have some flair, you can definitely tell they're very flat and compressed compared to anything we got on the AES or MVS, which is a little bit of a disappointment. Now I understand that from a technical standpoint, the Nintendo DS isn't going to be able to do the same 2D sprite work with its screen that something like the AES was capable of, but it is still a little bit of a bummer. But as far as the gameplay is concerned, it is exactly what you want from a Metal Slug game. The bosses are really intriguing and fun. You'll see here with the first boss, it fills the entire screen. The sprite work is great. This is the type of boss fights that I want when I play a Metal Slug game. So considering that 7 is the last mainline entry, the series goes out on a decent note. I wouldn't call it a high note, I'd call it a 7 out of 10 note. But I do love that they at least made the boss battles epic and large like we expect, because in Metal Slug 4, the game that this kind of visually reminds me of the most, the boss fights in that game were just completely uninspiring. And this is a game that has some interesting features with the DS2, considering it's the first game that was specifically designed for consoles. You have different types of challenge missions in the menu. You're going to have limited continues until you get further into the game. So it's interesting to play a Metal Slug game that wasn't meant for arcades, but was meant to be played, obviously not as a home console system, the DS is a portable, but outside of that arcade experience. Now I will say you do get a lot of good story elements in between each round. You see these kind of alien guys with these antennae on their head come out with this new blue slug, so you do get more of a console experience when it comes to that story, and it gives you different mechanics like these movable platforms right here. Like I said, the thing that I just don't love about the game is the drab color palette. Metal Slug 1, 2, X, 3, 5, and 6 all had great color work to them, 4 being the other exception that didn't, and it's an unfortunate situation that Metal Slug 7 goes back to that kind of brown and olive color. Now, of course, that was the popular colorway of the era. All the Call of Duties and those other games just loved taking all the color out of games, and it just seemed like a stylistic choice when this game was made to kind of bring the colors down, make them less intense, and make them a little less exciting. But you'll see here, even though the game's giving us new things to do, and the gameplay is great, we're still just dealing with the same like 6 colors: rust, green, yellow, brown, orange, and red. Now mechanically the game is doing different things though. You're getting this weapon system here where you can reserve your weapons up top, so you don't have to use your special weapon if you don't want to when you get it. You can go back to your regular shot, or you can have 2 weapons in reserve, so it really gives you a little bit more of a tactical idea in your head as to when you may want to save those weapons for. Maybe you want to bring the rocket launcher into the boss room, that's totally fine. And you will see that they didn't really make many new assets for Metal Slug 7. It is reusing a lot of the sprite work from the original games, and that's fine. I understand they're not going to make too much new, but we don't even really get any new enemies in 7, which is also a bummer. But the soundtrack for what it is decent, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I'll come back and talk more about the last mainline Metal Slug game ever made. But this boss is cool, I'm into him. Enjoy. So yeah, the soundtrack's exactly what you'd expect from a Metal Slug game. Of course, the audio quality is not as good because I am playing this on the Nintendo DS and I have to emulate it because getting direct capture out of a DS is quite a difficult thing and I do not have a setup for it currently. But you will see here that we're at least getting a little bit more color into the game, even if it is in very limited situations. These robots that come up here underneath you, it's a nice gameplay mechanic to have to attack below on this moving platform, and I do like that they have that blue in their helmets. But unfortunately, again, I just don't know why Noise Factory decided to go back to this really drab color profile. It just lacks charm when you look at it compared to Metal Slug 1, 2, X, and 3, and that is just a gigantic disappointment. But what I can say is one of the highlights of Metal Slug 7 are the boss fights. They're big, they have multiple stages, it's everything you want out of a Metal Slug boss, because Metal Slug boss fights have always been dynamic, they've always been big, there's always been a lot to do in them, and Metal Slug 7 is at least giving us that. But finally we get out of those caverns, we move into an outside area, but again, it's just brown, it's olive, drab, green, it's Call of Duty like, it's just a real big bummer. And that water in the background, of course being the DS, it's a DS specific effect, it just doesn't look as good as the rest of the Metal Slug games. So kind of 7 is hard to review in a way. Mechanically it is great, it's the gameplay you know and love from Metal Slug, the boss fights are awesome, the action is intense, all the weapons are great, you get that expanded weapon storage system where you can store weapons and take them out when you want, and some of the new slugs are quite interesting. My only complaint about this game is that it just isn't that much fun to look at, and that is just a disappointment because part of my favorite thing about Metal Slug is just how beautiful the artwork is, the backgrounds, the sprites, the colors. It is entirely a package and you need all of those things executing correctly at the same time for it to feel like a genuinely amazing Metal Slug game. This game would have been so much better if it just did different things with the artwork, and it is unfortunate that they have not. But the real bummer is we have not gotten a Metal Slug 8. Metal Slug Tactics is probably going to be out by the time this video plays, and that's looking really amazing. I'm glad SNK is bringing the franchise back and doing something different with it, but I would just love to see a new Metal Slug game. It's what we want, because this is incredible. No one else is really doing things like this. This boss fight is huge, it's dynamic, it's exciting. I need more of these running gun games. Now, of course, we got Cuphead, and in some ways, Cuphead kind of felt like Metal Slug. You had the melee, you had the great artwork, you had the running gun shooting aspect, and that game was quite successful, so clearly there is still a demand for games like this. We just need different developers to give them to us. And who knows, I make these episodes so far in advance and I do the commentary so far in advance, it is quite possible by the time this video goes live, maybe there's been a Metal Slug 8 announcement. Fingers crossed on that, because I just can't imagine why we haven't gotten more of this franchise, because it is one of the best franchises in running gun and arcade history. And I like that you get this little parachute segment here. It doesn't do a lot to add to the game, but it is just a little something different, and I do love this new lightning gun as well that just completely shreds every single enemy on screen, acting as a type of homing attack. But we've gone through the entire Metal Slug franchise. We've talked about Metal Slug 1, 2, X, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, as well as In the Hunt and Geostorm. And it has been an amazing time to talk about the evolution of a series that I've loved so much, because I have played every single Metal Slug game time and time again. I've probably played Metal Slug 3 24 times at this point in time. If I'm bored and I want to play an arcade game quickly, hanging out on my couch, I'm going to put Metal Slug X or Metal Slug 3 on. So I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive into the evolution of the Metal Slug series. If you like it, leave me a comment down below and maybe I'll do an evolution series on another franchise. If you have any recommendations, leave them down below. But short of that, that is the Metal Slug franchise. Do me a huge favor, guys, go down below, hit like, subscribe, that notification bell definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined, we got a Patreon link down below as well if you want to support the channel. But yeah, Metal Slug, even the bad games are good and the great games are some of the best arcade games ever made. SNK, Neo Geo, they just nailed it when they created this series. But we'll be back with the rest of the videos throughout the week, and if you like this series, let us know. Bye bye.